السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala, the topic for today is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevated the levels of the mothers and the role that a mother would play in her life. And as we mentioned before, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us to be upon many different roles in our lives, and each one has its acts of ubudiyya to Allah. Since this entire life, it's about وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create the jinn or the mankind except to worship me, except to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A few days back, when we quoted the statement of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, when he was making the tafsir of this ayah, and he said that إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, except to worship me, means إِلَّا لِيَأْمُرَهُمْ وَيَدْعُوهُمْ, except for them to be commanded and for them to be called to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means al-ibadah is commands of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to do something, and we say سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا, we listen and we obey. He forbade us from something, we say we listen and we obey. And the only way for us to know that is from the wahy from Allah, the revelation from Allah, which is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Nothing else matters, really. And this is how we get to understand all of these matters. It's not about what we think or cultures or what people like or whatever. This is all deen of Islam, and we are the objective, the goal of life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? By being a mother, by being a child, by being a husband for men, whatever, being someone that is working for someone, what type of aqd, what type of contract that you have between yourself and those who you work for. It's all ubudiyya to Allah. There are commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be observed, and with relationship to other relationships and commands of Allah. If someone is commanded by a human being to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's no obedience to anyone except to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Things like this. So when we talk about this motherhood in Islam, and you all know how many evidences in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ talks about this, and there are many aspects of it. And this is what women in Islam, they should have this zeal in them to fulfill this level, and this is the hope and the objective that they all should have against what the enemies of Allah, they try to divert the women from, and the men from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them for. So instead to make them compete with one another, so it reaches a state where people do not know who's men and who's women and things like this. So a man cannot be a mother. It's only for women. And a man, for him to be a father, this is a good thing if he fulfills the obligations of it. But we would see in the nusus always that it leans towards more of the women and the virtue of the mother, and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that we know that. But very briefly, inshallah, first of all, just points that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the ihsan and goodness towards the parents associated right after the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to worship Him alone and to avoid shirk. وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Worship Allah, to not associate partners with Allah, and be kind to your parents. Right after that. Because it's the first right in our life that we have to observe when it comes to the other human beings in our life. The rights of the parents, the rights of the father and the mother. And the many verses that talks about this, and then how that the smallest level of discomfort that you would cause to your parents is kabira, one of the major sins. فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا. And the uff is not even a word, but anything that will cause them to be discomfort as a result of a gesture or a word or anything. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. Say pleasant speech to them. And as one of the tabi'een, he asked Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, he says, all of what's in the Quran from the bir al-walidain, قد عرفته, I know it. إلا قوله, except the statement, وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. What is the meaning of, say, a kareem qawl? Kareem can be pleasant, can be generous. What is the meaning of qawlan karima? What is it? So Sa'id al-Musayyib, rahimahullah, he said, قول العبد المذنب للسيد الفظ الغليظ. The statement of al-abd, the slave, al-mudhnib, the sinful slave, to his master, there is fadlun ghalid. His master is harsh and he is bad manners. He has bad manners. So if there's slavery and you have the owner of the slave is someone that is harsh with bad manners and he can do anything and no one can hold him accountable for his actions if he wants to punish his slave. And that slave, he is not innocent. No, he is mudhnib. How would that slave speaks to that master? This is what he described to him, al-qawl al-kareem. This is how to speak to the parents. So this is by itself how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored the mothers in this life, that he commanded their children to speak to them like this, to honor them, to respect them, to be obedient to them. And if, as we know, and with so many reasons why this is, for example, a person might not see it happening from our children, whether it's our faults or others, this is something that it shows when you have a right and it's not being observed, you get a lot of rewards by being patient, because this is something that you deserve and it's not happening to you. So that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide ourselves and guide our children to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. And this is whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims, as we know. And the ayat of the Quran are very clear in this. And Asma radiallahu anha, when she said to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, my mother came to me and she's mushrika. She associates oneness with Allah. So she asked the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, should I be kind to my mother? He said, Na'am, sili ummak. Yes, be kind to her and have a good relationship with her and things. And وصاحب أمة في الدنيا معروفة. Be a good companion with them. And as-suhbah is different than just being kind. Suhbah, that means they are your companions. You're always with them. And the hadith, من أحق الناس بحسن صحابتي, who among the people have the best of my companionship? He said, Ummuk, your mother. Then who? Then your mother. Then who? Then your mother. Then who? Then your father. 3 times the mother and 1 for the fathers. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ also said, Inna Allah yusikum bi ummahatikum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yusikum. He's commanding you to take care of your mothers. Thumma yusikum bi ummahatikum. Then he is commanding you to take care of your mothers. Thumma yusikum bi abaikum. Then he is commanding you to take care of your fathers. Thumma yusikum bil aqrab fal aqrab. Then those who are close and those who are close. And this is many ahadith. Not 1 or 2 or 3. There are so many ahadith without any doubt that shows how that importance. And this is all level of virtue that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for the mother as also the same for the father, but it's not the same. And as the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, when a man came to him and he said, أردت أن أغزو وقد جئت أستشيرك. I wanted to come and fight with you, O Prophet of Allah, going with him in one of the expeditions. So, but I came to ask your opinion. So the Prophet ﷺ, he asked him, هل لك أم? Do you have a mother? He said, yes. قال فلزمها. Then stay with your mother. فإن الجنة تحت رجليها. Because the Jannah is under her foot. So this is where the Jannah is. To be there, to serve her, to take care of her. Again, the evidences are so many in the subject. And that by itself, again, as we said, whether it happens or not, if you are a son or a daughter, you're supposed to take care of your parents. But if you're not and you want to be a parent, these types of hadith should encourage the people to have this. And everything is by the qadr of Allah. Some people, they don't have the ability, which is then, this is all by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But even if that didn't happen and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for them to have this obedient child, for example, then to be patient with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon us, and to know that this is also a rewardable thing. And there are so many examples from the life of the companions radiallahu anhum and the early generations of Islam, that how they were so faithful to their parents. And this maybe we can talk about it in some other time, but I wanted to hear just in, briefly in this session to share with you that when it comes to one aspect of motherhood, which is how she or how some of the examples how she was faithful to her children. We talked about being a wife, and that's something that we should be always reminded of, and this is as a command of Allah, and not to do it according to what the husband is expecting, for example, but rather according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, and that makes things completely different. But here, when it comes to the children and how to be kind to them or to fulfill their rights, even though when it comes to the mothers, it's something that is natural. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them with the love that they have in the hearts towards their children. And when it comes to that, we have, as the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, "Ana wa kafirul yatimi fil jannati hakadha." Me and the one that is supporting a yatim or an orphan in the Jannah like this. And he pointed with the forefinger and the middle finger, and he made a space between them. That means how close a person is going to be when he's taking care of the orphans. And many times people think that it's the one that's spending money on the orphans. There's a hadith that shows that comes first to the woman that she has orphans, meaning that her husband died or something like this, and she's taking care of her children. As the hadith of the Prophet والسلام, when he said, "An awwalu man yuftahu aw yaftahu bab al-jannah." I'm the first one that the gate of Jannah is open for. إلا أني أرى امرأة تبادرني, but I see a woman that is coming to me, or coming in front of me. فأقول لها مالك. So I say to her, "What's the matter with you? What's wrong with you? What's the matter with you? And who are you?" So she says, "أنا امرأة قعدت على أيتام لي." I'm a woman that I stayed to take care of my orphans. So that means this is the level that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make her there because of taking care of her children. And the famous hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, when she said a woman entered, a woman came to her and she had two daughters and she was asking for food. And as we know that whoever asks for food is different than those who ask for money, especially at times when people were truthful. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, "I did not find anything except tamra wahida, one piece of date." So فأعطيتها إياها, I gave her this one piece of date. That's the only food in the house of the Prophet ﷺ, and she gave that even without even knowing what's going to be there for later. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, فقسمتها. This woman took the piece of date and she split it بين ابنتيها, between the two of her daughters. Each one took half, and she did not eat anything from it. And this narration says one tamra. So she split it into half, and she gave each half to one of the daughters. And she left, and the Prophet ﷺ, when he came, and he mentioned that من ابتلي من هذه البنات بشيء فأحسن إليهن كن له سترا من النار. Whoever is given some of these daughters and he's tested by them and he's kind to them, whoever is kind to his daughters, then they become sitran lahu min al-nar, they would shield them from the hellfire. In the narration of Sahih Muslim, the miskina, or this poor woman, she came with two daughters, and Aisha radiallahu anha, she found 3 dates in the house. So she gave each one of them a date, the woman and the 2 of her daughters. So the woman, she gave each one to the daughters, and she was about to eat her own date. So فَاسْتَطْعَمَتْهَا ابْنَتَاهَا. Ibnataha, they looked at her in a way that they want to eat it. So she split the tamara, the date that she was about to eat, and she gave it to them. And they're hungry. They're looking for food. And one date. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she was pleased with what she saw. And she mentioned that to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ said to her, إن الله عز وجل قد أوجب لها بها الجنة وأعتقها بها من النار. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Jannah an obligation for her. That means she is from the people of Jannah. And she's freed from the hellfire by one date. Right? So one date that was the reason for her to be from among the people of Jannah, and she was freed from the hellfire. And this one date to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a major thing. And you see how the context of it and how the sacrifice that she did in a few seconds or a few minutes or whatever, that she reaches this high level by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's all the kindness to the children. And even like one of the narrations, Hani radiallahu anha, she's the sister of Ali radiallahu anhu. So she's the cousin of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. She was married to someone, his name is Hubayra, and she had 4 sons from him. So, and then of course, afterwards, this is like her previous marriage. So after Islam, and this husband, Hubayra, he was a disbeliever, so she's not married to him anymore. So after some time, the Prophet والسلام, he was engaged to her. So Hani, she said, "O Messenger of Allah, that this is the most beloved thing to me for my eyesight and my hearing, the fact that she was going to be married to the Prophet والسلام, and that the right of the husband is azim, وحق الزوج عظيم. They understood the right of the husband. It's a major thing. But she said, but I'm afraid that if I do so, and أضيع بعض شأني وولدي, that if I do so, I won't be able to take care of my children. And if I take care of my children, I'm not sure if I'm going to be fulfilling the rights of my husband." So the Prophet ﷺ praised her. And he said that in خير نساء ركبنا الإبل نساء قريش, the best of the women, those who ever on camels, are the women of Quraysh. Why? أحناه على ولد في صغره. أحناه, al-hanan is this love with compassion and goodness towards the child when he's young. وأرعاه على بعل, and the best to take care of their husband when it comes to when he's poor or something like this. So this is, again, the Prophet ﷺ praised her of this, and how the concern of taking care of her children. So there are many examples like this at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and how they would take care of their children in a way, especially with the deen of Islam. It's like the children is their project of life, to make them obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make them among the people of Jannah, to save them from the hellfire. Otherwise, if the goodness and the sacrifice and all of that is just to make them strong in this life, but then they end up in the hellfire, what's the point of it? It would have been better for them that they're nothing, but they're among the people of the Jannah. So this is something that throughout the history of Muslims, the Muslim woman is always something that you would find amazing incidents that you would not ever find the like of it in any other type of a nation or so. And for example, when Hind bint Utbah, and she killed Hamza radiallahu anhu, and she took, when her slave, he killed him, and she took a piece of his liver, and she cut his nose, mutilating his body like this. With all of what happened, and the Prophet ﷺ was grieving in such a way because of Hamza, and when the Prophet ﷺ he saw Safiya, which is the aunt of the Prophet ﷺ, coming to see what happened to her brother. So the Prophet ﷺ said to her son, which is Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, he said, "Dunaka ummak, famna'aha. Dunaka ummak, go check your mother, prevent her from going to see her son because of what the disbelievers did to him." And his main concern is that she doesn't see the status of Hamza radiallahu anha, so she become terrified as a result of that, meaning in sadness and grief. So when the point here is that when she went, she's going to see her son. So Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, one of the 10 Ashara Mubashirin bil Jannah, he is her son. And he stood right there and trying to prevent her from going. So she said, "Dunak la arda lak, la umma lak." She got angry with him. Move away from me. I want to go see him. So he immediately went back to the Prophet ﷺ. He could not stand to say no to his mother. And when the Prophet ﷺ, he told him, okay, let her go. Right? And then she kept going till she saw her brother, and she starja'a, she said, Inna Allahi inna raji'un, and she asked for forgiveness. And she said to Zubayr alayhi to say to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, ما أرضانا بما كان في سبيل الله, that لأحتسبن ولا أصبرن إن شاء الله. She said, this is fi sabilillah. This is for the sake of Allah. So this is where we're pleased if it's fi sabilillah. She said, I will seek reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I will be patient, inshallah. Inshallah. So her level of al-iman. And Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, and when his stories in the way that he would go to the armies and go left and right and no problems whatsoever, but instead in front of his mother something else, right? And he was very famous of his bravery, radiallahu anhu. But when it comes to his mother, the matter is, this is the end of it, and this is and how the love that they had, and how that the concern also that she had towards him, and how they feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is where we need to go back and learn these types of things. And really we should be blamed ourselves, and I'm part of that blame, that we should translate more and more of the life of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and the tabi'een and tabi'i tabi'een, with these examples and these categories of actions, and how they would give strength to their children. Because even Safiya radiallahu anha, when it was said that when Zubayr ibn Awam, when he was 5 years old, she would take him outside in the desert, in the dark, and tell him to come back on your own, raising him to be brave, raising him to be a man that only fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the same thing Asma radiallahu anha, with her son Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and she was married to Zubayr ibn Awam. And when Abdullah ibn Zubayr, they were about to kill him, and we mentioned this before, right? And how she gave him strength, and she's a mother. And when he told her that if they kill me, they'll mutilate my body. So she said, what's the matter what's wrong with a goat when they skin it after they kill it? It doesn't feel anything afterwards, right? So she was giving him strength and courage to be firm upon the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is how they were gaining that strength from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the Quran, from the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And that's why look at anyone that was steadfast upon the deen of Allah, someone that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed for him to change others, and look at the mother, the one that raised them, and to teach them the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to make them obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with the dua, the dua that needs to be done, and the dua of the walid, meaning the parent, is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is one of the rights that we have towards the children, is to make lots of dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for them, to raise them to be among those who their hearts are attached to the hereafter. Not to raise them for the materialistic things of this world and the hearts are attached to it, and then we ask who to blame because of what they are upon. And that's why we have to be extremely careful. Everything around them, it's geared towards making them complete secularists, if it's even accurate to say that word. That means whether it's the schooling, the education, whatever they're exposed to, they don't see the religion. They don't see the deen of Allah. They don't see how important is the religion in their life. Everything is dunya, everything is materialistic things. So the normal thing is the hearts become so materialistic. And our job, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us, is to do the best we can, at least when they are young and under our control, is that the environment is the environment of the hereafter, the environment of the deen of Allah. And learning the Quran, learning the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, knowing their proper lineage, which is basically the Sahaba, the Imma. And when we talked about how the mothers of the Imma, the mother of Sufyan الثوري, when she said to him, "Oh my son, اطلب العلم وأنا أفيك بمغزلي." You seek knowledge and I'll take care of you with my maghzal, sewing clothes and things like this, so that he is secluded completely to learn the knowledge of the deen of Allah. The mother of Imam Ahmad, and also we mentioned that before, how she said, she would tell him, "Ya bunay, oh my son, if you wrote 10 letters, فانظر, then look into these 10 letters that you wrote, 10 words, sentence, whatever. هل ترى في نفسك زيادة في خشيتك? Do you see in yourself increase in your fear of Allah, in your hilm, in your forbearance, manners, in your waqar, in your respect of yourself, in the way that you conduct yourself? If you don't see that, فاعلم أنها تضرك ولا تنفعك. If you don't see that, then know that this is basically is harmful for you and it does not benefit you. This is what she said, the mother of Sufyan, radiallahu anhu, wa rahimahullah. They were, taking care of the children and making sure that the ilm that they learn, something that would affect them, affect their knowledge, affect their manners, their ibadah, their fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the mother of Imam al-Bukhari, the mother of Imam Ahmad, these mothers are, examples. We don't even most of us do not know the names of them. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them from they did the same thing. The Sheikh, the scholar or the Sheikh of Imam Malik, Rabi'at al-Ra'i, his mother, she spent on, for the ta'lim, for the education of her son, the ta'lim of the deen, 30,000 dinar that her husband left. After he died, he left 30,000 dinar. She spent it to educate her son the deen of Allah, traveling and going and things like this. So this is how they understood the importance of it, and they sacrificed for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the steadfastness and the obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and guide our children and guide us to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I just wanted to just mention such a quick reminder, inshallah. طيب, barakallah fikum. We'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala, also because of the time for the salah there. We continue, inshallah ta'ala, next time. Sallallahu sallam wa barak ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.